So now let's take a loop at loops. So we're back at JSBin, and I've got the JavaScript and console tabs open. I chose to switch it up from Sublime Text because I thought, it's good to see different things. Just let your mind kind of get used to like different platforms. Some people use Sublime, some people use JSBin, some people use CodePen, but it really doesn't matter as long as you can follow along and kind of get what's going on here. So we're talking about loops now. We already looked at if statements and else statements and doing basic logic. We'll come back to more logic examples, but to continue on with our discussion, we'll talk about the first of many loops and the act of looping. So looping. Before we even get into like writing our first loop, a loop is essentially something you want to do when something is basically repeating itself. So like when you have to add a number plus 1 to a variable and you have to do it like 10 times, you could just keep adding 1 to a variable, but that would get very repetitive. So when the task is repetitive, and basically we could use a while loop to do this incrementing. So let's say if I had a variable x here and I said the value of x is actually equal to 1. So while x is less than 10, we'll just say x plus equals x plus 1. And then we'll go ahead and console log the value of x is, and then plus x. So here, this while loop is going to repeat over and over and over until x is now 10. And then once it's 10, this loop will stop. So remember, while will do a condition check. It's very much like an if statement, and it will keep doing the same thing until the statement is no longer true. While the statement is true, do the following task here. So this task is repetitive, right? We want to add x, we want to add 1 to x, and we want to keep doing it about 10 times. So let's see what happens. So we get the value of x is 10, so that's good. So our variable has run at least 9 times, and after 9 times, like 9 plus 1 is 10. And we can prove this to ourselves by keeping track of the value of x here too. So if I clear this and I run this, it says 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you can see that each step of the way x is getting incremented by 1. So that's kind of how a while loop works. Now let's talk about a do while loop. So a do while loop is pretty similar to a while loop, except for the fact that a while loop will only run if the condition is true. A do while loop runs even if there is no condition. So technically, like, it does not do any kind of check. It runs right away and then does the check thereafter. So this could be like, let's say, you want to add 1 for sure, at least to the variable once. But after that, you're not sure. You want to, continue to add 1 if, it's less than 10. So let's say your variable was already 10. We could say x equals x plus 1. The same thing we wrote before, and then while x is less than 10. So let's see what happens, and then of course console log x. So clear now, and we'll go ahead and comment to this stuff here so we're not confused by the other stuff. So we'll run this, and we get 11. Okay, so why do we get 11? And why don't we get more numbers? Well, essentially because this thing runs 1 time, and so the value from here is 10 already. So then we add 10 to 1 and we get 11. And then of course 11 is already greater than 10, so this thing doesn't run again. However, if I made this value here 5, now what should we expect to see? Take a moment to think about it, and then I'll hit run. Okay, I'm hitting run. So now you see 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So notice I haven't console logged x here, I'm console logging it here. So we can assume that when the value of x is finished up here, we would say that it's 5 at this point, and then it would become 6, then 7, then 8, then 9, then 10, because this value here will return true. 6 is less than 10, so do it again. 7 is less than 10, so do it again. 8 is less than 10, so do it again. 9 is less than 10, so do it again. And 10 is not less than 10, so then it stops basically. It does it one more time, and then we're done. So that's essentially what's going on here. Actually, if we want to prove this to ourselves, actually, we can put the value of x here and then here, just to see what's happening. So 5. So right here it's 5, and then after adding 1 it's 6. So then again, 6 is less than 10, so console log the value of x at this point, it's 6, and then after we add 1 it's 7, then again 7. 7 is the value here, and then adding 1 it's 8 here, then 8 is less than 10, so we log 8 here, then of course 8 plus 1 is 9, so 9 is the value here, and then of course 9, and then we add 1 more, and then we get 10. So if you follow this, you'll kind of understand like how the loops are working. We're going to do more examples, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So now we're on to the last of our loops. So I'm going to comment these, and I'll just basically keep only the var x uncommented. So we have 1. And we're going to talk about for loops. So the difference between the while loop, the do while loop, and the for loop is that a for loop has the conditions already sort of built in. So we usually create a for loop with 3 conditions. We have a variable which we initialize. So this variable is pretty much exactly the same as like declaring a variable outside over here. So inside the for loop, we declare a counter, and then we say I less than 10, right? So I'm using I instead of x, but my true false statement here is this thing here, while I is less than 10, and then of course I add in an incrementer here. So very much the same. This I++ is pretty much the same as I plus 1 is equal to I. So it's almost the same syntax, but the only difference is that all the initialization code, like the the setting of x, and then the incrementing of the x, and then the test case are all inside this parentheses here. So you can say that these variables are local to this scope here, when basically what I'm saying is essentially that once we get out of the for loop, these variables no longer have any effect. So the for loop is kind of like its own like closed off bubble. Whatever happens in here stays in here. Nothing else from the outside affects it unless we explicitly say that stuff from the outside needs to be updated. So just to kind of continue with the example so it's a little bit more clear, a for loop basically can be used in the same way by console logging the value of I, and we can just say is plus I here. So I'll hit run, and you can see that the value at this point was 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9. So when we hit 9, then the value is 9 here, and then at the last increment when we hit 10, 10 is not less than 10, so the loop breaks. So if you want to make this a little bit more clear to yourself, you could use like an if-else statement. So you could say if I equals 9, then console log, this is the last time a value gets printed. And we'll see how many times this thing actually gets printed. So it only gets printed one time because 9 is the last index before it goes to 10, and then 10 is no longer true, and that breaks the statement. So I hope this made sense. There are 3 main loops that you can use when you want to do some kind of repetitive task. Like the most common is using loops to do any kind of addition, especially if it's adding like 1 to a number. Suppose you had to keep track of like a game, and each time the player scored, you add 1 to their score. So your loop would probably be very much in charge of this. And each time like there's a score or there's a goal, then we want to increment the score one more time. So that concludes this lesson here. Next, we'll talk about a simple example using a while loop with and creating like our own like simple banking program where we can put money into our bank and then withdraw money out of the bank, and then of course continue to add and withdraw as many times as we can until we're out of money. So we'll see how it works, and if you like that, then we'll go on to like some more interesting stuff afterwards. So until next time, thank you.